I didn't expect the silence to be this loud. The walls of the apartment were paper-thin, literal cracks in the plaster where years had pulled the building apart in small, slow ways. The floor groaned under my feet as I stepped inside for the first time. My suitcase wheels caught on the edge of a loose tile and stopped. I almost took it as a sign. But I was already here, and I had nowhere else to go. The landlord had left the key under the mat, wrapped in a faded note with a half-hearted welcome and a phone number I wasn't sure anyone would ever answer. Second floor, third door on the left. Don't slam it, it sticks. He wasn't kidding. The door did stick. It took both hands and a sharp shoulder to force it open. The room smelled like old books and boiled water, not unpleasant, just stale. There was only one window, facing the alley. The curtains were the kind of beige that used to be white, now yellowed like tea-soaked paper. A single ceiling fan hummed above my head, trying its best to convince me the room had some air left to circulate. I could hear it, the way it pushed and pulled at the shadows. But more than anything, I heard him. Not clearly, not at first. Just footsteps, soft, deliberate, pacing the room beside mine. Then the quiet creak of wood, like someone adjusting their weight on an old chair. A click, and another, rhythmic, mechanical, familiar in a way I couldn't place. Then silence. A long, lingering silence, as though he, whoever he was also listening. I paused, hand still gripping the handle of my suitcase. Had he heard me? The thought shouldn't have made my pulse quicken, but it did. I swallowed hard and glanced toward the wall we apparently shared. I hadn't seen him when I arrived. No one had come out into the hallway, no footsteps on the stairs behind me. But now, there he was. Not in sight, but present in the atmosphere, like the residue of a scent you can't name, but can't ignore. I moved quietly around the room, unpacking the few things I had brought. A worn-out paperback, a tea mug with a crack down one side, 2 notebooks, one of which was mostly empty. I was 34, divorced, childless, and utterly exhausted. I had traded a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs for this, a 1-room rental with a sink that dripped and a wall that already felt too intimate. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt watched. And oddly, I didn't mind. I made tea that night, not because I wanted it, but because boiling water was the closest thing I had to a ritual, something that made this strange, silent room feel slightly more mine. I sat on the edge of the mattress. And then I heard it again. Click, click, pause, click. A faint whirring. Then the soft sound of keys being tapped, not furiously, not angrily, but slowly, thoughtfully, like someone writing with care. The noise of a man who did not sleep early. I don't know how long I sat there, mug in hand, tea untouched. My gaze drifted toward the wall again. I imagined him there, only a few feet away, sitting at a desk, maybe barefoot, maybe shirtless, maybe not thinking of me at all. And yet, I reached for my notebook and started writing. Day 1. New place, new wall, new neighbor. Still the same old loneliness, but softer somehow. It has a heartbeat now, not mine, but nearby. That night, I left the lamp on, just dim enough, and I didn't close the curtains. I wasn't sure who I was waiting for, or what I expected, but I let the window remain open to the alley light. And when I finally lay back, just as I was slipping into something not quite sleep, I heard 3 soft knocks. Not on my door, but on the wall. The 3 knocks echoed in my chest long after they faded. I didn't move right away. I just lay there, still as the night air, heart beating in that quiet, questioning way, like it was waiting for permission to react. I could have told myself it was a pipe, or the building settling, or some other harmless thing creaking in the dark, But it wasn't. It was deliberate. 3 distinct taps, spaced evenly, not rushed, not urgent, but unmistakably human. I sat up slowly, the sheet slipping down my legs, and turned toward the wall. Silence. I placed my hand against the paint, fingers splayed across the cool surface. It wasn't cold, not anymore. It had absorbed the warmth of my breathing, my presence, and maybe his too. I didn't knock back, not yet. The next morning I left early. Not to avoid him, I told myself that, but because I had errands to run. At least, that's what I wrote in my notebook over a cup of instant coffee I didn't finish. He knocks. I listen. Maybe that's all we are, quiet people touching space through walls. The hallway was dim as always. The wallpaper near his door peeled at the corners. A single houseplant wilted in a broken pot beside the stairwell. I glanced at his door on my way down, half expecting it to open, half hoping it wouldn't. It didn't. But someone had slid something under mine while I was gone. It was waiting when I returned, a thin sheet of paper, neatly folded once. No name, no markings, just a faint charcoal smell. Inside, a photo. Black and white, grainy, beautiful in a way that felt accidental. It was a still image of my hands, mine, holding my chipped tea mug from the night before. The shot was cropped close, like he'd taken it from a crack in the door or the alley window. Just fingers and porcelain and steam. And on the back, in neat, uneven handwriting, "You looked like silence personified." I stared at it for a long time. My first reaction should have been fear. This was, after all, a photograph of me taken without consent, proof that I was being watched by a stranger, a man I hadn't seen clearly, hadn't spoken to, hadn't invited. But I didn't feel fear. I felt seen. Not in the performative way, not like a picture you post and pose for. This was different. He had caught something I didn't know I was showing, a kind of stillness I hadn't realized had formed around me like fog. And now he had given it back to me, as if to say, I noticed. That night I waited. No tea, no lights, no music, just me and the dark. The clicks returned, the camera, or maybe the keys of a typewriter. He never used music, never muttered to himself like some do when working. Only silence and soft mechanical sounds that made the wall feel thinner than it should. At midnight, I turned on the lamp by the bed, dim, amber, like a candle that had forgotten to die. I took the photo and slid it under his door, same as he had. I wrote 3 words on the back. I'm still listening. Then I sat cross-legged on the floor by the wall, resting my head against the cool plaster. I waited, not for a reply, I wasn't that naive, but maybe for a vibration, a breath, a sense of nearness. And then it came. 3 soft knocks, again. But this time slower, closer, measured, like fingers dragging memory into sound. I raised my own hand. My palm hovered for a moment, then tapped once. Silence. Then again, 1 soft knock. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know the man. I didn't even know what game we were playing. But I was in it now. 2 strangers, separated by a wall, speaking in knocks, watching in silence, drawn together not by touch, but by the unbearable tension of everything not said. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of noise, there wasn't any. Just the quiet knock of presence, the pulse in my ears when I lay too still, the echo of 3 soft taps on the wall, and my own answering knock in return. It had become our language now. No names, no faces, just sound and silence, response and waiting. The next morning, sunlight bled through the thin curtains like diluted gold. I stood by the window for a long time, holding my breath without knowing why. Part of me thought he'd be outside, the man next door, maybe crouched in the alley with a camera, waiting for the light to hit my face just right. But the alley was empty. Only the scent of rain on concrete. Only the rusted bicycle left abandoned near the dumpster. Only my own reflection staring back at me from the windowpane. By noon, I found something new under my door. A photograph. But this one wasn't mine. It was him. His back, actually, shirtless, facing away from the camera. Taken in dim lighting, muscles outlined in soft shadow, head tilted slightly as if listening. It looked like it had been taken with a timer, or maybe a mirror. The grain of the image made it feel timeless, like it had always existed. He had framed it so the curve of his spine matched the edge of a window frame. Minimal, intimate, raw. And on the back, "We're even now." I sat down on the floor, photo in hand, and stared at it for a long time. There was nothing sexual about it, no posturing, no intent to seduce. It was vulnerable in a way I hadn't expected. He had given me a piece of his body, but not to provoke, only to match my own. I ran my fingers over the texture of the paper. He had printed it on real film stock, not from a phone, not from some throwaway digital shot. This was deliberate, meant. The kind of photo you develop yourself, in a darkroom, breathing chemicals and poetry. "This man lives in shadows," I wrote in my notebook, but somehow he's lit something inside me I forgot was flammable. That night, I turned off the lights early. I lit a candle instead, the scent of sandalwood curling upward in slow spirals. I stood near the wall and whispered, "Are you there?" Of course, he couldn't hear. But seconds later, there were 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then 2. Then 1. I had no idea what the pattern meant, but my heart answered for me, quickening, tightening, unfolding like a letter you'd buried under your pillow years ago. I reached for my pen. This time I wrote on paper, not in my journal. "What color are your eyes?" I slid the note under his door and waited. No answer came that night. But in the morning, taped to the inside of my door with a single strip of black photo tape was a small square envelope. Inside, another photograph. His eye, just one, cropped tightly, black and white, every detail in sharp focus, the curve of his lashes, the faint shadow beneath. And though the image lacked color, I somehow knew they were dark brown, like warm coffee just before the cream is stirred in, like burnt honey. And there, below the photo, he had written, "I want to see how you look when you're not hiding." I kept the photo by my bed, not framed, not hidden, just there. A single eye, printed on textured paper, resting atop my notebook like it had always belonged. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at it while brushing my teeth or folding laundry. Sometimes I'd whisper things to it that I didn't mean to say aloud. Things like, "I wonder what your voice sounds like when you say my name." Or, "Would you look at me the same way if I were closer?" Or worse, "I'm starting to forget the point of walls." We didn't speak, not with words, but our conversations deepened in other ways. On the 5th night, I heard it again. 3 knocks. Then silence. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, fingers tracing the paint. Then, just to see, I knocked once. He waited, then knocked once in return. I smiled. It was ridiculous, childish, but suddenly I wanted to test it. 2 knocks from me. 2 knocks back. I held my breath. Then I whispered, "Can we make this something?" And somehow we did. That night, under candlelight and insomnia, I made a key. A system of taps. Knocks. No. Knocks. Yes. 4 knocks. Ask me something real. I wrote it down on lined paper in black ink, folded it once, and slid it under his door. The next evening, I heard 4 knocks. It was the softest rush of adrenaline I'd ever felt. It started in my stomach, low, patient, then spread up like smoke behind my ribs. I placed my palm against the wall. Then I whispered, just barely loud enough, "Do you ever imagine what I look like?" Silence. Then 3 knocks. I exhaled, startled by how warm my cheeks felt. I asked another, "Do you think you'd recognize me in a crowd?" 3 knocks again. I don't know why I asked the third one. Maybe because the room had gotten too quiet. Or maybe because part of me wanted the silence to break into something riskier. "Would you kiss me if we met in a place where no one knew our names?" This time he took longer. Long enough for me to wonder if I'd crossed something. Then, 3 knocks. But slower, weightier, as though the answer had cost him something. I didn't ask anything else that night. I just sat there, pressing my knees to my chest, and let the silence surround me again. Not empty this time, but full, like a room right after a violin stops playing. The music still there, clinging to the air, refusing to die. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I traced the photo of his eye again. There was something about it I hadn't noticed before. Not fear, not sadness, but restraint. Like he was holding back something enormous just beneath the lens. Like he had rules, and I had just asked him to break one. And still, he had knocked. 3 times. I hadn't spoken out loud in almost 2 days. It was strange how quickly the voice forgets its weight when it has no reason to be used. But my mind was loud, too loud. A constant thrum of questions, replayed knocks, phantom sounds in the wall. 3 knocks meant yes. But yes to what? I hadn't decided if I was afraid of the answer or the fact that I might want to ask more. The kettle boiled at exactly 11:34 p.m. That had become my hour. Something about making tea before midnight made the room feel gentler, like I was offering the night something small in exchange for its silence. I opened the cupboard to find I was down to the last packet of chamomile. Faded, bland, familiar. A flavor that had no surprises left in it. I sighed, dropped the bag into my cup, and stood at the counter in the dim light. Then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard before. Soft rustling, paper on tile, a quiet shuffle. I stepped toward the door and opened it slowly. No one there. But on the floor, just at the edge of the welcome mat, was a small bundle wrapped in a gray handkerchief, folded carefully, tied with twine. I knelt, fingers trembling slightly as I reached for it. The fabric was soft, worn from years of use, probably carried in a coat pocket, maybe kept close to the chest. Inside, loose tea leaves, fresh, rich, earthy with a sharp hint of ginger and something floral, jasmine maybe, that bloomed the moment the air hit it. Tucked inside the folds was a handwritten note, the same uneven handwriting from before. For the hour when the silence feels too thick, 1 spoon per cup. Breathe slowly. There was no name, no signature, not even a knock to announce it. I closed the door, locked it out of habit, and stood in the kitchen for a long time, breathing in the scent of something not mine, not familiar, but made just for me. I prepared the tea exactly as instructed. 1 spoon, cup rinsed warm first, no sugar. When I brought it to my lips, I understood something I hadn't before. He knew taste the way he knew light, subtle, deliberate, intimate, the kind of knowing that takes time and attention. I sat by the wall, cradling the cup between my hands, and whispered without knowing why, "Thank you." A minute passed, then 2, then 3 knocks. I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes, letting the steam rise past my face like a sigh. I didn't need to see him to know what he looked like right now. He was probably doing the same, drinking something warm, waiting for the next sound, the next note, the next reason to stay awake. This is what intimacy looks like when it doesn't touch you, when it doesn't speak, when it lives only in ritual and shadow and the breath between 2 walls. That night, I didn't turn the light off. I fell asleep with the cup still warm beside me, and I dreamed of hands I hadn't held, lips I hadn't kissed, and a voice I'd never heard, whispering my name through a wall. The next morning, I stayed home. I told myself I had a headache, a small excuse, harmless and forgettable, but the truth was more selfish. I wanted to hear him again. Or see him, even if only in passing. Even if I had to pretend I wasn't looking. I moved my desk closer to the window. The light came in softer that way. Slanted, golden, with little flecks of dust dancing in it like secrets that had learned how to float. I kept the curtain half drawn, enough to give the illusion of privacy, but still allow a view of the narrow alley between our buildings. His window was across from mine, maybe 15 feet away, just diagonal enough that I could glimpse the edge of his room if the blinds were open. They rarely were. But that morning, for a few quiet minutes, they were. Just a sliver. I saw part of a wall, gray with peeling paint. A bookshelf. A stool with a dark gray towel folded neatly over it. And light. Warm, rich, almost golden, pooling near the floor like someone had spilled the sun. And then I saw him. Only his profile. He was standing near the window, shirtless again. Camera slung casually around his neck, a steaming mug in one hand. He didn't look over. He didn't need to. He had the stillness of someone who knew he was being watched, and allowed it. It was the first time I'd seen his body in motion, not frozen through a photograph, not imagined through knocks and breaths. He was tall, lean, all quiet strength and unspoken edge. The kind of man who filled space not by noise, but by weight. He stood there for a long moment, sipping, then turned toward the inside of his apartment and disappeared from view. But something fluttered in the corner of the window. A curtain. His curtain. It moved deliberately, not from breeze, there was no breeze, but from intent. He had touched it, pulled it aside just enough, just once, and I understood. He had let me see him, on purpose. That night I left something for him for the first time. It wasn't a photo, it wasn't tea, it was a drawing. Just a small sketch, pencil on soft ivory paper, of a steaming mug with two hands holding it. Mine. Underneath I wrote, "For the man who gives silence a taste." I slid it under his door before midnight. No knocks, no sound. I didn't wait for an answer. But in the morning, the drawing had been returned. Same paper, same pencil. But now there was a second pair of hands, larger, rougher, drawn in, holding the same cup, not replacing mine, just joining. And beneath it, in the corner, two words: share it. I pressed the paper to my chest like it might fall apart otherwise. For the first time I realized how dangerous it had become. This thing we were doing. It was no longer just a wall between strangers. It was a bridge, a thread, a risk. And something inside me, something long asleep, whispered, "Step over." I hadn't meant to see him, not like that, not in the light. The plan was simple: step out for groceries, come back with tea, keep my head down, pretend I wasn't waiting for a sign from someone I'd never officially met. But the universe had other ideas. I was halfway down the narrow stairwell, juggling my keys and coat, when I heard the door below creak open. Not my door, his. And then I saw him. He had earbuds in, one hand gripping the camera strap slung over his shoulder, the other still holding the knob behind him like he hadn't quite committed to leaving yet. His eyes met mine before I could look away. Dark brown, just like I'd imagined. But sharper somehow, not aggressive, not intrusive, just awake, like they were always halfway through observing something you hadn't realized was visible. I stopped 3 steps above him, one hand tightening around the railing. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The air between us was still, but not empty. It buzzed, it trembled. He took out one earbud, slowly, a silent gesture of offering. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I looked at the camera on his shoulder. It wasn't raised. He wasn't hiding behind it. For the first time, there was nothing between us. No knocks, no paper, no lens. Just skin, eyes, breath. I think he was waiting, not for a greeting, but for permission. And somehow that made me trust him more. "Hi," I whispered. It was barely audible, more breath than voice. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, just a soft pull at the corner. And then the lowest voice I'd ever heard in real life. "Hi." It sat in my chest like a chord struck too gently on piano strings, soft, imperfect, but resonant. We stood there for a moment longer. I could have said his name, but I didn't know it. I could have asked, but I didn't want to ruin the tension. Instead, I gave him a gift. I stepped down one stair. Now we were only 2 steps apart, close enough to see the flecks in his eyes, the faint scar above his brow, the stubble along his jaw. Close enough to feel the pull. He stepped aside, body angled just enough to let me pass, but not too much, like he didn't want the distance to feel like rejection. As I moved past him, shoulder brushing the edge of his arm, I felt something warm drop into the pocket of my coat. He didn't say anything. He didn't look back. He just climbed the stairs behind me in silence and disappeared into his room with a soft click of the door. I waited until I was outside to reach into the pocket. It was a photo. Me, on the stairwell, from behind, just seconds ago. Already developed, already printed. Which meant he'd taken it before I left my apartment. And he'd followed, just enough to leave this behind. On the back, a single line. "You look like someone learning how to be touched again." I closed my eyes, heart hammering. This was no longer just a game. It was becoming a story, and I wasn't sure who was writing it anymore, him or me. I didn't know he had my number. I didn't even know how he found it. Maybe the mail slot on my door. Maybe the crumpled utility bill I'd left on the hallway table one night out of forgetfulness. Maybe he never meant to use it. But he did. And he didn't call. He sent a voice message. No words, just sound. It came at 2:17 a.m. I was already awake. My phone lit up with the notification, and for a second I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the play button. It felt like a moment I could still step back from, a cliff I could still pretend I hadn't seen. But I tapped it, and what played through my speaker was the sound of breath. His breath. Long, slow, unsteady. And then the soft scrape of a chair against the floor, the hum of a lamp, the rustle of what I imagined was paper, and finally, a voice. Not directed at me, not staged, just him speaking into the dark. "Sometimes, I wonder what your laugh sounds like." He paused. "I imagine you laugh with your head tilted slightly to the right, that your eyes crinkle more than your lips move, and that you hate that about yourself." Another pause, a breath. "I've never been more sure of something I've never seen." The message ended, just like that. No name, no greeting, no goodbye. I sat up in bed, phone pressed to my chest, and didn't move for what felt like an hour. He had heard my silence. For weeks. Now, he had let me hear his. I didn't respond. Not at first. What could I say? Everything about us had been wordless, bodiless, until now. And yet, there was something about hearing him speak that made everything more dangerous, more real. He didn't sound young. He sounded tired, like someone who had watched too many people leave, or maybe who had left too many himself. His voice had the texture of a person who carried things they didn't talk about, like guilt, or loneliness, or grief that had long dried, but still left a taste. I listened to the message again the next night, and the next, until I finally broke my own rule. I recorded a reply. I waited until 2 a.m., lit the candle he hadn't seen but somehow knew I kept, and let myself speak into the silence. Just one sentence. I laugh with my hand over my mouth, like I'm afraid the sound might ruin something. I didn't sign it. I didn't even play it back. I just hit send. There was no reply. Not that night, not the one after. And for a moment, I wondered if I had broken something, if giving too much would push him back into his quiet place, behind the lens, behind the wall, where I couldn't follow. But then on the 4th night,
I found something new. Not under my door, not taped to it, but slipped between the pages of the book I left open on the windowsill. A photograph, blurry, taken through glass. My silhouette against candlelight, hand resting near my lips, mid-laugh, caught in the act. On the back, "You didn't ruin it. You're the only sound I want to hear." There are moments when the air between two people becomes so thick it might as well be skin. That night, the wall breathed. It was just past midnight. The world outside was wrapped in rain, the kind that doesn't fall, just settles, soaking into concrete and conversations you were never brave enough to start. I had the lights off, candle burned down, curtains open, everything soft and quiet, except my chest. It beat louder than it should have. Then I heard it. 1 knock. Then 3. The first, to ask, "Are you there?" The 3, to say, "Yes, yes, yes." I moved to the floor without thinking, blanket around my shoulders, knees drawn up. I pressed my back against the wall, the side of my face, my cheek warmed by it. And then, another sound. Fingers, sliding, the soft scrape of skin against drywall. He was there. Not just present, close. So close I could hear him exhale. And then, I did it. I raised my hand and pressed my palm flat to the wall, waiting. It didn't take long. His hand met mine from the other side. Not with force, not all at once, just fingertips first, searching, aligning, finding me. I closed my eyes. We sat like that for I don't know how long. Minutes, maybe an hour. Time softened, melted like wax. I felt the heat of him, the weight of what this was. Not touch, but presence, real, solid, aching. We didn't move, didn't speak. We just were. I imagined what his hand looked like on the other side. Bigger than mine, rougher, maybe ink-stained, maybe scarred. I imagined he was kneeling too, forehead near the plaster, just like me, breathing carefully, not wanting to spook the moment. And then he started to move. Not away, along. Slowly his palm slid up the wall, fingers dragging a line behind them. I followed, matching. We traced each other, separated by half an inch of drywall and 1,000 silent questions. We reached as high as we could, then down again. Circles, pauses. At one point, I swear he drew something. Maybe a letter, maybe the curve of a heart. Or maybe that was just me wanting. It was the most erotic thing I'd felt in years. And no one had touched me. Not really. Not yet. At some point, I whispered, "This isn't safe." I wasn't sure if I meant emotionally, logistically, or existentially. All of it, probably. He must have heard me, through the wall, through the quiet, because he knocked once. Just once. Not no.
Not yes, but something else. Something like, "I know." The storm didn't knock. It broke. Rain slammed against the windows like it wanted in. Thunder rolled across the sky in long, distant waves, shaking the old pipes in the walls. Somewhere in the building, a window slammed shut, or open, and I jumped at the sound. The power cut out at 9:42 p.m. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was charged. I lit a candle, then another. Outside, the alley flooded fast, ankle-deep within minutes. The downpour blurred the edges of the world. Everything outside was soft and indistinct, like a painting left in the rain. My door handle rattled when I reached for it. I hadn't planned to go out. I just needed air. But it was jammed. The wood must have swollen in the humidity. No matter how hard I pulled, twisted, nudged, it stayed stuck. I cursed under my breath and kicked it gently with my heel, not out of anger, out of fear. And then I remembered.
He was there, next door, close. My hand trembled as I knocked once, then 3 times, the familiar pattern. Seconds passed, nothing. I whispered his name, or the name I had given him in my head. I wasn't sure if he even had a real one anymore. Not in this world. In our world, he was just him. Then I heard it, the creak of a floorboard. Soft footsteps. And a knock, slow. Twice, then once, then silence. He understood. I didn't need to say it. I'm trapped. I can't get out. 5 minutes later, a knock on my door. A real one. I opened it. Or rather, he opened it, from the outside. Apparently, it only stuck from within. Something about pressure and angle and swelling wood. I didn't really hear the explanation, because I was looking at him. Really looking. He was soaked. Hair dripping into his eyes. T-shirt clinging to every line of his body. Jeans soaked to the knee. He stood in my doorway like someone carved out of shadow and thunder, real in a way that scared me. His chest rose and fell, slow but deep. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. The rain behind him made everything feel cinematic, like we weren't real, just a scene that would end when the next cut came. I stepped back without being asked. He stepped in without assuming. I closed the door. And just like that, for the first time, we were in the same room. No wall, no photographs, no paper, just breath, just skin, just him. Water dripped from his hair onto the floor, onto my rug. I didn't care. I watched it soak in like a secret, like evidence. He looked at me, not like a question, but like a mirror, and I felt seen in a way that stripped me down to bone. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "about the door." "You're not," he said softly, voice like dusk, "and I'm not either." The candle flickered between us. I reached out, not for his face, not his chest. I touched his wrist, just barely, and it felt like I had lit something that had been waiting to burn all this time. He didn't move. He let me. And then, slowly, he reached up and tucked a damp strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my skin. I gasped, not because it hurt, because I didn't realize how starved I was for it. Just touch. Just this. He didn't kiss me. We didn't fall into each other. We just stood there, close enough to feel the heat rising through damp clothes, close enough that the rules didn't matter anymore.